Let us begin by taking a deep, settling breath, allowing the noise of the day to fade into the background, leaving only the quiet space of the present moment. We are going to take a journey together, a journey of the mind, traveling northward to a place where the hills roll gently against the horizon and the seasons paint the landscape in vivid, changing colors. Imagine yourself in a car, driving slowly along a winding two-lane highway in upstate New York. It is autumn, late autumn, when the vibrant reds and oranges of the maples have dulled to rust and brown, and the air holds that crisp, sharp promise of the winter to come. The sky above is a sprawling canvas of steel gray, vast and encompassing, pressing down softly on the world below. We are entering the Finger Lakes region, a place of profound geological beauty, carved out by glaciers thousands of years ago. Here, deep, narrow lakes stretch like fingers across the map, holding waters that are cold and dark and ancient. Between these lakes lie small towns and villages, communities stitched together by winding roads and farmland, places where time seems to move just a little slower than the rest of the world. As we drive, the landscape opens up. We see old barns with peeling red paint, standing stoic against the wind. We see fields of corn, the stalks dry and whispering in the breeze, waiting for the final harvest or the first heavy snow to flatten them back to the ears. And nestled in this quiet pastoral valley, surrounded by the rolling hills of Tompkins County, lies the town of Dryden. At first glance, Dryden appears to be the quintessential American village. It is the kind of place you might see on a postcard or in a painting that captures the nostalgia of a simpler time. Main Street is lined with beautiful, historic homes, structures that have stood for over a century. There is the Southworth Library, a stunning stone building with arched windows and a heavy wooden door, inviting you into a world of hushed silence and the smell of old paper. There are churches with white steeples reaching toward the gray sky, and a small, tight-knit community where neighbors wave to one another from their porches. It is peaceful here. The rhythm of life is dictated by the rising and setting of the sun, by the school bells that ring in the distance, and by the slow turning of the seasons. It feels safe. It feels familiar. It is the kind of place where people move to raise families, seeking the comfort of a small town where everyone knows everyone else, where doors are left unlocked, and where the nights are quiet and filled with stars. But places, like people, have memories. They hold on to the echoes of the past, absorbing the joys and the sorrows of those who have walked their streets. And Dryden, for all its beauty, for all its scenic charm, carries a heavy burden of memory. It is a burden that rests upon the town like a thick morning fog, lingering in the valleys long after the sun has risen. There is a name that has been whispered about this place, a name that stands in stark contrast to the idyllic scenery we are visualizing. They call it the Village of the Damned. It is a harsh title, one that evokes images of horror fiction or ancient curses. But the story of Dryden is not a work of fiction, nor is it a ghost story in the traditional sense. It is a story of a specific window of time, a singular, tragic decade where the shadows seemed to lengthen, and the veil of safety was pierced, again and again. It is strange to consider how a place can be defined by a period of time, how a span of 10 years can rewrite the identity of a community that has existed for 200. Between the years of 1989 and 1999, this small, quiet circle of the world experienced a concentration of tragedy that defies statistical probability. It was as if a dark cloud had parked itself over the valley, refusing to move on with the wind. During those years, the people of Dryden were forced to confront the fragility of life in a way that few communities ever do. As we mentally walk through the streets of the village now, imagine the leaves crunching softly beneath your boots. The air is cold on your cheeks. You pass by the white clapboard houses, their windows glowing with the warm, amber light of lamps turned on against the approaching dusk. Inside, families are gathering for dinner. Televisions are murmuring the evening news. Life continues, as it always must. But beneath this normalcy, there is a shared history, a collective memory of that decade. When outsiders hear the name Village of the Damned, they might expect a place that looks dark, dilapidated, or abandoned. But the tragedy of Dryden is found in its very ordinariness. It is found in the fact that these terrible things happened here, in a place that looks so much like home. The landscape itself seems to hold these secrets. The Finger Lakes region is known for its gorges, deep, dramatic cuts in the earth where water rushes over shale and limestone. These gorges are breathtakingly beautiful, but they are also treacherous. They are places of edges, of steep drops, of hidden depths. In a way, the geography mirrors the history. On the surface, rolling hills and calm waters, but beneath, sudden drops and sharp, jagged edges. Let us pause here for a moment and simply listen to the sound of the town. Can you hear the wind moving through the bare branches of the oak trees? Can you hear the distant hum of a car traveling down Route 13, its tires singing against the asphalt? Can you hear the silence that settles in the spaces between these sounds? In the late 1980s, before the storm of events began, Dryden was a place where the outside world felt very far away. There was no internet to speak of, no 24-hour news cycle constantly scrolling on our phones. News traveled by word of mouth, passed from neighbor to neighbor at the grocery store, or discussed over coffee at the local diner. This closeness meant that when tragedy struck, it didn't just happen to a stranger on the news. It happened to someone you knew. It happened to the person who sat behind you in church, the cashier at the market, the girl who babysat your children. This intimacy is what made the coming decades so heavy. When we speak of the Village of the Damned, we are not speaking of a supernatural force, though to the residents it may have felt that way. We are speaking of a cascade of human events, accidents, choices, and heartbreaking coincidences that piled up, one after another, like heavy snow accumulating on a roof until the beams begin to creak. Imagine the winter in upstate New York. It is long, and it is deep. The snow comes off the Great Lakes, sweeping across the state in white curtains that hide the world from view. It muffles sound. It buries the roads. It forces people inside, into their homes, into themselves. There is a beauty in this isolation, a cozy, hibernation-like quality, but there is also a sense of being cut off. During the decade in question, that sense of isolation seemed to amplify the sorrow. Each event, each loss, felt like another layer of snow falling on a town that was already buried. The community would just begin to shovel out, to clear the driveways and find their footing after one tragedy, when the sky would darken and the snow would begin to fall again. We look at these events now through the lens of history, safely removed by time, but we must approach them with gentleness, honoring the reality of the pain that was felt. We are not here to revel in the darkness, but to understand the resilience of the human spirit in the face of it. To understand how a community endures when the universe seems to have turned against it. As we prepare to delve deeper into the story of Dryden, let us hold on to the image of the town as it stands today. Peaceful, quiet, enduring. The Victorian homes still stand proud. The library still welcomes readers. The hills still roll gently into the distance. The curse, if one chooses to call it that, eventually lifted. The dark cloud finally moved on, but the scars remain, invisible to the naked eye, but felt by those who know where to look. They are woven into the fabric of the town's history, a dark thread in a tapestry of green fields and blue lakes. So, settle deeper into your relaxation. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breathing slow. We are merely observers, floating like a mist through the streets of this village, bearing witness to a time that is past. We are safe here. We are simply listening to the echoes of a decade of tears, in a place that looks, for all the world, like paradise. The sun is setting now in our imagination. The streetlights of Dryden are flickering to life, casting long pools of yellow light onto the sidewalks. The shadows stretch out, reaching across the lawns, connecting house to house. The air grows colder. The wind picks up, whispering stories of what once was. In the silence of this upstate evening, we prepare to turn the pages of history back, to uncover why this peaceful hamlet, this village of friendly faces and scenic views, came to be known by such a sorrowful name. We prepare to look into the heart of the mystery and the heart of the tragedy that unfolded under these same gray skies all those years ago. The pages turn slowly, revealing the year 1989. It is December. In this part of New York, winter arrives with a heavy, muffled silence. The snow falls thick and persistent, coating the rooftops of Dryden in a blanket of pristine white. It is a time for holidays, for lights strung along the eaves of Victorian homes, for families gathering in the warmth of living rooms while the wind howls outside. But in the fading days of that decade, the silence of the snow became heavy with something else. A shadow fell across the threshold of a home on Ellis Hollow Road, a shadow that would mark the beginning of the sorrow. It began with a family, the Harris family. They were new to the quiet rhythms of this town, seeking the same peace that draws us all to the countryside. But peace, as we know, is a fragile thing. It is like a thin sheet of ice upon a winter lake, beautiful to behold, yet easily shattered. The tragedy that befell them is not one we need to recount in sharp detail, for we are here to understand the feeling of the town, the atmosphere of a community suddenly holding its breath. It is enough to know that a darkness entered that home, a sudden violence that claimed 4 lives in the quiet of the night. When the sun rose the next morning, the world looked the same, yet everything had changed. The snow still sparkled, the trees still held their frosted branches to the sky, but the air was different. It was the first tear in the fabric, the first drop of ink in the clear water. The town of Dryden, accustomed to the gentle worries of rural life, found itself staring into an abyss it could not comprehend. Neighbors looked at neighbors with a new kind of gaze, a mixture of confusion and a deep, aching sympathy. The tragedy seemed like an anomaly, a terrible, singular storm that had passed through and would surely never return. But the wheel of time kept turning, and the years that followed seemed to catch in the gears of misfortune. We drift forward now, floating through the mist of the early 1990s. The seasons change, the green returns to the hills, the lilacs bloom in the yards, but the shadow remains. Hardly had the town caught its breath when another echo of loss sounded through the valley. A young girl, Eliza, a child of only 2 years, vanished into the winter air. The search for her was a testament to the heart of this village. Picture the lines of volunteers, walking shoulder to shoulder through the frozen fields, their breath rising in clouds, their eyes scanning the brush and the snow. It was a community trying to heal itself through action, trying to push back the darkness with sheer will. But the ending was not the one they prayed for, and when the truth was found, buried beneath the cold earth, the weight on the town's shoulders grew heavier. It is in these moments, when grief piles upon grief, that the human mind begins to look for patterns. We seek to make sense of the senseless. We look at the gray sky and wonder if it is angry with us. We look at the land and wonder if the soil itself remembers some ancient wrong.
As the decade progressed, the incidents became strange in their frequency, bizarre in their variety. It wasn't just one type of tragedy, but a kaleidoscope of sorrow. In 1993, a betrayal of friendship unfolded that shook the town's sense of trust. Two young men, friends since childhood, found their bonds severed by a sudden act of violence. It happened in the quiet intimacy of a home. A place of safety turned into a scene of loss. The community struggled to understand how the seeds of such darkness could grow in the fertile soil of their shared upbringing. The innocence of friendship, the assumption that we know the hearts of those we hold dear,
began to fray. And still, the years marched on. We move now to 1996, a year that stands out in the collective memory like a bruise that refuses to heal. It was autumn, a time when upstate New York is at its most breathtaking. The hills are ablaze with gold and crimson. The air is crisp and smells of wood smoke and dried leaves. It is football season, a time of youth and vitality. But in Dryden, the cheering stopped. A car accident, a twist of metal on a dark road, claimed the life of a beloved cheerleader. And then another tragedy followed so closely, it seemed the town was not allowed to mourn one loss before the next arrived. The high school, usually a place of laughter and the slamming of locker doors, became a hall of whispers. The empty desks in the classrooms were silent testaments to the curse that people were beginning to speak of in hushed tones. Imagine walking through those hallways, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the posters on the walls advertising dances and games, and beneath it all, a current of fear. The students, young and full of life, began to look at their own mortality. They attended funerals instead of parties. They wore black ribbons instead of school colors. The Village of the Damned, a name whispered by outsiders, began to feel less like a headline and more like a heavy coat that the town was forced to wear. The tragedies were relentless in their pacing. It wasn't just the youth, it was the protectors, too. A football coach, a figure of strength and guidance, became another chapter in this sad book. A house fire, raging in the night, taking with it the laughter of children. Each event, taken alone, would be a scar on the history of any town. But here, gathered together in the span of a single decade, they formed a constellation of pain. The world outside began to watch. News vans would park along the quaint Main Street, their satellite dishes pointed toward the indifferent sky. Reporters stood in front of the town hall, in front of the churches, trying to summarize a decade of tears into a 30-second soundbite. They asked, "Why here? Why this place?" But for those living inside the mist, the question wasn't why. The question was, when will it end? Let us pause here, in the middle of this decade. Imagine standing on a hill overlooking the village as the sun dips below the horizon in 1996. The lights of the houses are twinkling on, one by one. From this distance, it still looks like paradise. The tragedy is invisible from the outside. It is hidden behind the curtains, tucked away in the photo albums that are too painful to open, buried in the cemetery that has grown too full, too fast. The wind blows through the valley, rustling the cornstalks, carrying the scent of impending rain. The atmosphere is thick, charged with a static energy. You can feel the tension in the earth. It is the feeling of a place that is waiting for the other shoe to drop. The residents of Dryden go about their days. They buy groceries. They mow their lawns. They attend Sunday service. They are resilient, incredibly so. But beneath the routine, there is a vigilance. A mother watches her children play in the yard a little longer than she used to. A driver checks their mirrors a second time. A neighbor glances at a strange car passing by with suspicion. The fabric of the community is stretched tight. It has not torn, not completely, but it is worn thin. The trust in the randomness of life has evaporated. In its place is a wary acceptance that here, in this beautiful village, the shadows are longer and the night is deeper. As we prepare to move toward the close of the decade, the air remains heavy. The story is not yet finished. The Village of the Damned has more pages to turn, more names to carve into stone. We float here, suspended in the amber of memory, witnessing the endurance of the human spirit in the face of a relentless tide. The silence returns, not the peaceful silence of the beginning, but a silence filled with echoes, waiting for the final chapters to unfold. And so, the calendar pages continued to turn, driven by the indifferent momentum of time. The decade that had weighed so heavily upon this small corner of the world, the 1990s, began to draw its final breath. With the turn of the millennium, there came a subtle shift in the wind, a gradual loosening of the grip that had held the community in such tight suspense. The era that would later be chronicled in articles and documentaries, the era that earned the village its dark moniker, eventually receded into the archives of history. But history, as we know, is not merely a list of dates and events. It is a landscape, a physical place where memories reside. In Dryden, the landscape began to reclaim its peace. The seasons continued their ancient rhythmic cycle, indifferent to the sorrows of men. The winters came with their profound silence, the snow falling in heavy, soft sheets, blanketing the village in a pristine, white hush. The snow has a way of softening the edges of the world, of muting the sounds of the street, of covering the scars of the earth with a layer of cold, clean purity. Under this blanket, the village slept. And then, the spring would return. It always returns. The ice on the lakes would crack and melt, dissolving into the deep, dark waters. The green shoots of daffodils and tulips would push through the soil in the front yards of those Victorian homes, the same yards that had witnessed so much history. The return of color, the return of life, offered a silent promise to the residents. It was a promise that life persists, that despite the shadows, the light eventually finds its way back through the canopy of the trees. The label, The Village of the Damned, is a heavy title to bear. It suggests a place forsaken, a place where hope cannot take root. But if you were to walk the streets of Dryden today, if you were to wander past the library or sit on a bench in the park, you would not feel a curse. You would feel the quiet, steady pulse of a small American town. You would see neighbors pausing to speak about the weather, about the local high school football game, about the mundane, beautiful trivialities of existence. It is strange how a name can linger in the headlines, while the reality of a place heals quietly in the background. The media vans, the reporters, the cameras, they all eventually packed up and drove away. They left to chase the next story, the next shadow. And when the noise of the outside world faded, what was left was simply the community, the people who stayed, the people who refused to let fear define their home. They reclaimed their village, not with grand speeches or monuments, but with the simple act of living, by planting gardens, by painting their porches, by walking their dogs in the golden light of the late afternoon. Each ordinary act was a stitch in the fabric of healing, repairing the tear that tragedy had made. The vigilance that was once so sharp, so painful, slowly softened into a protective awareness, a deep communal care. The stories of the past are still there, woven into the local lore, carved into the granite of the cemeteries that rest peacefully on the outskirts of town. But they no longer loom over the present like a storm cloud. They have become part of the soil, part of the history, honored, remembered, but no longer feared. The village of the damned is just a phrase, a collection of words. The reality is the village of Dryden, a place of resilience, a place of endurance. As we reflect on this journey, on the inexplicable convergence of events that took place here, we are reminded of the fragility of life. But even more so, we are reminded of the strength of the human spirit. To endure such a relentless tide of sorrow, and to remain standing, to remain open to the sunrise, is a testament to something profound within us all. It is the refusal to let the darkness have the final word. Now, let your mind drift away from the specifics of the events. Let the names and the dates dissolve like mist over the Finger Lakes. Picture instead the landscape itself. Visualize the rolling hills of upstate New York, stretching out towards the horizon, rising and falling like the slow, deep breaths of a sleeping giant. The forests are deep and tranquil, the pine trees standing tall and still, their needles whispering secrets to the wind. Imagine the village as it is now, in the quiet of the night. The streetlights cast warm, amber pools of light onto the pavement. The houses are dark, save for the occasional soft glow of a nightlight in an upstairs window. The frantic energy of the past has completely evaporated, replaced by a profound stillness. The air is cool and crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and old wood. There is a peace here now that feels earned, a silence that is not empty, but full of rest. The roads that wind through the countryside are empty, quiet ribbons of gray under the moonlight. The noise of the engines, the sirens, the urgency, it is all gone. All that remains is the hum of the crickets, the rustle of leaves, and the vast, overarching sky. Above the village, the stars wheel slowly overhead, timeless and distant. They have looked down on this place for thousands of years, watching the comings and goings of generations. To the stars, the decade of tragedy was but a blink of an eye. They offer a perspective of eternity, a reminder that our troubles, however heavy they feel, are small against the canvas of the universe. We float here, in this safe, quiet space, suspended between the memory of what was and the peace of what is. The story of Dryden is a story of shadows, yes, but it is also a story of the light that follows. It is a story that teaches us that no winter lasts forever, that no night is endless. As you settle deeper into relaxation, let the resilience of this community offer you a sense of comfort. If they can endure, if they can find peace after the storm, then surely there is a reservoir of strength within you as well. A quiet place where you can retreat, safe from the worries of your own day, safe from the noise of the world. The book is closed. The chapter is ended. The ink is dry. There is nothing left to analyze, nothing left to fear. There is only the present moment, soft and heavy with sleep. Feel the weight of your own body, supported, held, just as the earth holds the village. Let your breathing slow down, matching the rhythm of the wind in the trees. In and out. The past is a memory. The future is a dream. Now, there is only rest. The echoes have faded. The silence that returns is the peaceful silence of the end, a silence that wraps around you like a warm quilt. The village sleeps. The hills sleep. The lakes are still glass mirrors reflecting the moon. And you are part of this great, quiet stillness, drifting, floating, letting go of the story, letting go of the thoughts. The narrative dissolves into the velvet darkness. Peace rounds, quiet remains. Sleep, deep and restorative, is here. Good night.